So maybe I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Chi Lau. I've been teaching in Hong Kong in Lingnan University for over 35 years. And now I'm semi-retired, but I still like to teach. So with the students who take my course on literature and cultural studies, they all have to do campus farming. So we have some places where students would have to learn how to farm and how to, touch the soil and coexist with all the frogs and lizards on campus. So, okay. So in the introduction, yes. In the introduction just now, you heard that I have a lot of interest. I have a lot of curiosity. And also, as I studied literature, Chinese literature and English literature, and I also was teaching in the cultural studies department, which is interdisciplinary. So even if I came from the humanities background, I was very curious about Einstein or different things, or how the nuclear reactor works, etc. So in my lecture today, I'm going to tell you about different things that I have been curious about and I have tried to do research on. So I'm showing you this picture, which is a beautiful one, which is called the Moon River Longevity Village in China, in the Guangxi province. So this went into the world record because in 2008, they had 141 persons over 100 years old. And if you look at the scenery with the river, with the different colors of the fields, you can see why people would call it the best green ecological county in China. The county is at the level below the province, but above the villages. So I will very quickly go over the first few parts because I would want to concentrate more time on discussing alternatives. Yesterday, I was very impressed by the lecture discussing the temporal and spatial differentiations that we have and how we can be linking the short-term immediate concerns with our long-term orientations, and also be able to look back at history and also beyond into the future. So in 2003, that was quite a long time ago, I edited this book on China Reflected. I brought all the physical books for you to take a look at. So in this book, we had a collection of essays by different writers in China who are basically progressive, non-orthodox writers. And at that time, and so here, we try to give you a picture of these different situations in China relating to the workers, relating to the coming in of neoliberalism, about women, about the writers and filmmakers. But then this book, we have put it for free download online. So you can find the link there. I will be sharing this PowerPoint with you. So no worries. You can also just click and then you can have the download of the book. So my title is Taking a Subaltern Perspective in looking at how we can strive towards ecological civilization. So what is subaltern perspective? I think yesterday there was a lot of emphasis on looking at the interests of the workers, of the working class. That I would subscribe to, but I think that today the question about the workers is a bit difficult, because now we have more unemployed than employed, and we have not only the displacement of manual labor by robots and machines, we have even so much of the AI, the artificial intelligence, which is so artificial that it is going beyond our control. And so I think recently you must have heard the story of an AI machine refusing to take instructions to shut down itself. So it has the sense of self-preservation, no shutting down, and so it changes its own program. And so that sounded such an alert, an alarm for people who are designing this. And so we have seen a lot of science fictions about the loss of control, about human beings being controlled by machines. But today we are seeing a lot of this displacement. Although in the mainstream media we talk about there's a lot of optimism about AI being so powerful. But then we can see that the immediate effect is that many of us who do research, who graduate with a PhD, you will find yourself joining the huge army of the unemployed. So today when we talk about workers, so we have to go beyond what Marx said at his time of the rise of industrial capitalism, that I think what Marx did was a very genius thing. He told us, he made the analysis that workers shouldn't be content with the salaries you are given, because there's the surplus value in this contradiction, between capital and labor, and so you have been exploited of your surplus value by the capitalists. Hence, you need to change the relations of production. And so I think that gives the weapon of struggle for the working class. But today, if we talk about only the workers in the factories, that is not quite enough. I think yesterday in the workshop discussions, I think not many people said that they have been involved in industrial action, right? In our group, there was nobody working on industrial action. So I think there's something that we have to look at. So when we say subaltern, I like to use this term from Gramsci, Antonio Gramsci. So he's saying that what is subaltern? They are the people who are being marginalized. Of course, in his context, he could only use a new word, subaltern, because all his letters from the prison were being censored. He had to go through the censorship, so he couldn't talk directly about workers' struggles. So he used this term, subaltern. But I think this is very useful because we will look at the world, analyzing how we can be taking the position and the perspectives of the exploited, of the underprivileged, of those in the margin, of those striving for survival. So we try to look at the world from the margins, from the global south, and we have been, in the last 200 years, all these problems with the Eurocentric discourses. All the universities, whether they are in mainland China or even in Peru, anywhere, we follow the Western model of modern education. And so, in a way, we have been, from the day when we start to go into kindergarten, following that particular educational system, we have been infiltrated or being brainwashed by all these Eurocentric models and Eurocentric discourses. And I think we also need to go back to see about what we mean by modernization. It's because in the mainstream, modernity is something positive. And when we talk about modernization, it seems to be something very positive. In China, in 1919, which was over 100 years ago, we had the democratization process, the May 4th movement, where students were playing the role of the vanguards to say that we need a new world. And that was not too soon. It was only 8 years after the overthrow of the Manchu dynasty. And at that time, the banners they put up were science and democracy. And of course, those were basically modeled on the West. So we have been, and my friend Samir Amin, he wrote this book on Eurocentrism. And I would recommend you to go and take a look at it, because I think it's one of the very first texts that go into interdisciplinary studies. And in Eurocentrism, he tells us he traced the history of the European discourse, going back to the Greece, going back to somewhere, but then there was a clear lapse in between. So I would recommend you to go to read the book yourself. And I think today in the world we have two main problems. One is elitism, and one is statism. So yesterday we also talked about nationalism, and whenever we encounter crisis, and whenever you want to distract the domestic population from challenging the regime, then you go into war, you go into very racist discourses, and that happens everywhere. We see that happening in Europe, happening in the United States, but we also see this happening, for example, in Africa, where I heard my friends from South Africa tell us how the local people see people from Zimbabwe or neighboring countries as aliens, as unwelcomed migrants. So we see that everywhere. The problem of racism also developing into fascism, it is a very dangerous sign. I think in this world today, we are all moving towards the right. And even if we do not like it, maybe somehow, in many of our own perceptions, we are also unwillingly, involuntarily moving to the right and taking up rightist discourses. So I think statism and elitism need to be challenged. And I would also suggest that we would have to counter mainstream media representations. So I think we don't really need to go much further if we take the situation in the Middle East now, when if you remember, many years ago, there was the picture, the image of a child dead by the seaside. And Germany was, I think the whole country was very moved. And then they started this policy of allowing refugees to come in through that particular picture. But then today we see every day we see the genocide going on by starvation in Gaza, and people going to get aid. They were stopped from getting aid for 11 months, starting from March. And then later on, then there is a new foundation, which is called GHF, something like that, a PHF, a Palestinian Humanitarian Fund, that is controlled not by the UN, but by the authorities in Gaza, which is, of course, currently the Israeli people. So when they get people to line up to go to to go into the military zone in order to get aid for food, then they were shooting on them. So about 4 days ago, when I was preparing the lecture, so they said that 500 people had died from trying to get aid. And yesterday, when I looked at the statistics, it's 600 people already and thousands injured. So there are some outcries, some discussion, a little bit of a discussion. Sometimes you can see the mainstream media referring to the starvation going on, but only marginally. So how can we, in this age, when we see literally things happening before our eyes, when we see the genocide, when every time we say we need to protect the women and the children. So as a feminist, we are usually very resentful about the phrase protecting the women. Now, why should I need to be protected by you? But I think in the case of Gaza, you see the mothers, you see the children being so helpless. And also, this is totally against any morals. To be killing children, to be killing the UN staff, and what kind of protest do we see from the mainstream media? So I think we have to counter all these mainstream media. So I had some writings about actions at the margins, or we have some of the links. So I just put that on the PPT. So I think I need to go a bit more quickly. Okay, for the ecological civilization. So this term, so when we talk about this, so should we name the 21st century as civilized or barbaric. If this is not civilized at all, if we have all this moral bankruptcy, can we call ourselves a civilization? Civilization should come from civilized. So we can we have this oxymoron saying we are a barbaric civilization, a civilization that is not civil, an uncivilization. So how should we name our 21st century? So we see wars and conflicts, we see climate catastrophes, we see all the nuclear threats. So for the wars and conflicts, I don't have to go further. I think there's all the breaching of international laws and protocols. They're violating all kinds of humanitarian and human rights standards. And there's genocide by starvation happening before our eyes every day. So I would sometimes go to some alternative media, for example, the Al Jazeera or the Telesur from Latin America, to try to get different perspectives of the news. So about the climate catastrophes, I also wouldn't want to go further because I think this should be common sense among us. I shouldn't need to preach to the converted. So we are already approaching the 1.5 degrees Celsius increase, which we have been told by all the scientists, etc., that is the threshold. And we are already on that threshold. And we know that every year when you look, we see that the average temperature is the record. So we can already tell that this year is the record, and next year will be another record. We are setting new records every year. And I think our body, we can sense this, we can feel this. So I don't think I need to go too much into this and telling you about all the information and data that you may need to know. Okay, about the nuclear threats. So there have been warnings this year between Russia, in the war between Russia and Ukraine, and also in the war between Israel and Iran, that we are on the verge of the Third World War. Somebody have already said that we are already in the phase one, first battles of the Third World War. But the Second World War was scary enough. The Third World War would be terribly scary because that would mean the destruction, maybe of at least half the population on Earth, or maybe they will make the Earth so uninhabitable that only a few could try to find their survival on Mars, on the Moon, etc. So nuclear weapons, we don't have to argue how many times they can destroy the world, the planet, because only once is enough. It's like discussing the discussion about how many angels can stand on a needle. So this is senseless. But then we also know the kind of catastrophe we are in. And about nuclear power plants, I think that is also something that we have to be very careful about. We know that there is no good solution to the waste produced by nuclear power plants, except that they could be made into nuclear weapons, which is why now they say that Iran, even if you do not have nuclear weapons, we do not want you to have a nuclear power plant because you can make nuclear weapons from that. That is also why Japan also made kept the nuclear waste, which would be for making into nuclear weapons. So there's also discussion that maybe within 2 weeks or a few weeks, Japan can already, with all their machines and facilities, they can make nuclear weapons. And now everybody knows that there's the danger of nuclear weapons, and the IAEA now, as revealed by the press, is known that they are going into Iran, saying they are testing everything and meeting all the scientists and passing on all this intelligence to the Israelis, which is why the Israeli attack this time was so-called so efficient. So that is also why Iran is now saying that IAEA is not trustworthy. So it is refusing it to come and scrutinize. But everybody in the world knows that Israel has nuclear weapons. And its defense ministers, its spokespersons at times leaked, whether it is a slip of tongue or whether this is intentional, that everybody in the world knows that Israel has nuclear weapons. But the IAEA never says that it has to go and inspect on them and to keep control on them. So we have a lot of exceptions. But then I don't think any of you would enjoy this privilege of the exception because you are not the powerful ones. So nuclear power plants, I think we have been told that, well, this is clean energy. This is an alternative to all the pollution of the CO2, etc., that we have. So this story, this discourse about clean energy, it has been so much made up. But then everybody, I think, you have heard about the Fukushima catastrophe, right? You might have heard about the protests in Asia about the discharge of nuclear contaminated water into the sea. I think you might have heard about that. If you haven't, maybe if it is the first time you're hearing about this, also congratulations. So with the Fukushima, it happened in about 14 years ago, in 2011, and nothing has been done to recover, to recover, because there was the explosion. You go on YouTube, you just click, you just type Fukushima, and then you can see that there were two explosions in the nuclear power plants, and after the explosions, the fuel was exposed, and it has to be cooled down every day by 150 tons of water. And the water passing over this nuclear debris is highly polluted and contaminating. So then they have to keep it in huge tanks. The tank would be about well, the corner of this room. And so they have 1,000 tanks to keep this contaminated water. Now they say that that's not enough, so we have to discharge the water so that we can put in more contaminated water. And then there's nothing the Japanese government has done to work on this catastrophe. So having a nuclear power plant is like putting a nuclear bomb in your own backyard, in your own home, which could explode. And we also see that there's all the threat from your rivals, that they think the best way to destroy you is to strike on your nuclear power plant, which means an explosion of them. So we are. This is the book I published. The one on the right is the book I published in China, and of course, in China there's so much nuclear power plants that it's really difficult to talk about the problems of nuclear power plants. But still, we managed to publish this book. And then we also published it with the Global University on Sustainability book series. And so it is in English. We couldn't afford to pay for the open access. So you may have to buy this, or you could write to me and I may send you a draft for you to take a look. So for Fukushima catastrophe, I'm also not going further into this, but if you are interested, then we can talk about that. So we are now in the situation where I would like to quote from Hamlet's soliloquy. He said, everybody knows the first phrase, to be or not to be, that is the question. The be is being, to survive, to continue living, or just to choose to die. That was the moment when he was seeing that there was the power of the king and his mother, the queen. The foster father who killed his father, which was too powerful, and there was no way he could counter that power. So he was considering suicide. So this is when he was thinking of suicide. And so that is this famous phrase, which is to be or not to be, that is the question. whether it's nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against the sea of troubles and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep, no more, and by a sleep to say we end the headache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, that's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come, when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. And then he continued to say that, why should all the people, he was not thinking only of himself. He said, why should all the ordinary people suffering all the humiliation, all the abuses of power, still choose to try to survive? And so he was thinking of those, and he said, no, I need to live on. And so then you have all the story unfolding until in the end, he courageously had his revenge by killing the king. And I think yesterday when we were asked to say, those who are optimistic, please stand up. I didn't choose to stand up. I think I'm very glad that half of you stood up. And I think I would like to quote Gramsci saying that we should have the pessimism of the intellect, but optimism of the will. Somebody said that didn't come first from Gramsci. It came first from Roman Roland. But anyway, so I think that is with the intellect, we do analysis, and when we try to look around at the world, there's all these negative things, all these abuses, all this suffering that we would like to end but feel helpless about. But then, despite the pessimism, we need to have the optimism, the will to survive and to find a future for ourselves and for the next generations. So, very quickly about ecological civilization in China. So I hope you like the pandas. I do. So when we talk about ecological civilization, shouldn't civilizations be supposed to be ecological? If it's not ecological, if it's not sustainable, can it call itself a civilization? So I think we need to define the spirit and the contents. And the term itself came further back in 2007 when the Communist Party said that it would build an ecological civilization and form an industrial structure, growth model, etc., etc. And so 2007 was a time when China was having a lot of problems of pollution. There was the open door policy starting in 1979. And then, so by 2010, the pollution was scary. There was air pollution, water pollution, everywhere there's garbage. And so there was this consequence of China's pursuit of modernity and development, modeled on the advanced West. So with the peak of pollution after 3 decades of the reform. So you see all the garbage here. So when I wrote an essay in 2015 about sustainability with ecological and economic justice in China, then I showed this picture. So here you can see that the green, the dark green, is a grade 1 to 3, which is good enough, good quality. And the yellow one is grade 4 and 5. And the blue one is worse than grade 5. So you can see the worst one here, which was in the year 2001 and 2002. So which means that 70% of all the 7 major rivers in China was below standard. Only 30% would be up to standard. So that was the situation in 2000. And so I think, of course, the government had to attend to this. And so there were many measures for improvement. So 10 years later, you can see that by 2010, about 60% of the rivers became better water quality. So there were the state policies bringing about changes. Yesterday we saw the chart talking about changes from above and changes from below. So I will very quickly go over the changes from above, and then I think we would all be more interested in how changes could be brought from below. So about the river pollution, the government then issued many orders, and there were also many local people also being trying to do something about the pollution. I heard a story, I read a story in the newspapers. A farmer, a peasant, was interviewed, and he said that he would sell his vegetables in the market, but because he knew that they were so polluted, he wouldn't take his own vegetables. Then people asked, and then how do you get your vegetables? He said, I bought them from the market. So then that means that he was selling his polluted veggies to the market, and he was trying to buy veggies that look more healthy. So we were in such vicious circles, and so the government put in a lot of effort. I wouldn't go into them. So with the improvement in 2003, we had the good quality water only at 53%, but then by 2023, 20 years later, after all these cleaning up, we have almost 90% being up to standard. And about the forestation, there was a lot of desertification in China, and so you can see that in the 1980s, it was only 12% in China, because China is big, but then in the western part, there's a lot of deserts. And so the afforestation was very bad, quite bad. It's only 12% in the 1980s, but then it was increased to 23%. So we may say that it is still not yet so favorable. So we should have more. I don't know about the coverage, forest coverage in Slovenia. But then over these years, China has the world's largest areas of artificial forests, such as the Sahamba Forest Farm, which I will talk about, and also in the deserts. And about air pollution, in 2023, the number of days with good air quality in the cities across the country increased to 85%. And Beijing's good air quality days increased from only 176 days in 2013 to 290 days in 2024. And heavy pollution reduced from 58 days 10 years ago to only 2 days last year. So we can see that there's a lot of improvement. So these are the statistics. But then who pays for the cost of this? But before I go to that, I will just very quickly go to the pledge by the Chinese government of going to carbon neutrality by 2060. So there was this declaration by the president to say that by 2030, China would achieve the carbon dioxide emissions peak, and by 2060, that it would achieve carbon neutrality. I think one of the reasons is that China is turning from the world factory into something different. And the factories have been moved to different places, to Bangladesh, to Malaysia, to different places. So the pollution doesn't come mostly from China. But I think if we look at the ecological footprint, we cannot just blame the producer who has the factory right there and so polluting the air, and you give the ascribe all these fault to the producer. It's the consumers who should be accountable for all this pollution too. So you can check all these. And so there's also the wind energy, solar energy, and nuclear energy, all these. Okay, but then how are the subaltern? By here, I mean the people on the underprivileged people, the people who don't usually have a say in the bigger politics. What's the impact on them? So I would like to tell two stories. One story is that we had in southern because we heard that Beijing there was a lot of air pollution. So the government was very strict on moving the polluting industries or the people away from Beijing. So there was a big fire at that time, and so the government used this as an excuse to move the people away. So 3 million people were removed from the suburbs right after the fire. And I wrote somewhere in an essay on this. And there was also the coercive conversion of fuel from charcoal to natural gas. This is supposed to be a very good measure, but then this was announced and then it was done within 2 or 3 months. So you can imagine that the people had suddenly to change from the charcoal stove to using natural gas. Those in the cities would be better off. Then your apartment building, they take care of all this. But then those in the countryside, then they have to buy the bottles. And so there was suddenly a short supply of these, of the gas. So it was a very hard time at the transition time. So we were having the Zoom meetings with our friends in Beijing. So in the daytime, they were putting on all their thick clothes, and we were asking, "You are in your home. What's happened?" So they say, "We are cold. It's freezing cold here." So you see that there are the consequences. So what is the outcome? You have all these spacious highways and beautiful new airport in Beijing in the south. So you can imagine all the migrant workers who had been staying there in the past. So have you heard about this complaint about shortage of garbage? So if today I come to you, I say, well, we want, because when you say, if I exclaim that we are short of garbage, so what do you mean? So that means we want more garbage, right? So there was this video going quite viral in China about the shortage of garbage just about 1 month ago, and then it received a lot of hits. And then there were people writing and comments they say that now I don't feel so guilty as before of producing a lot of garbage. So what happened? So is it a shortage of garbage or an excess of garbage incinerators? Actually, China's garbage incinerators grew from only 100 in 2010 to over 1,000 in 2024. So it is by 10 times. And there's a capacity of treating 1.11 million tons of garbage, domestic garbage, per day. So this capacity, in actuality, it treats 60% of the domestic waste in urban areas. It treats garbage 100% in the major cities, of course, in Beijing, Shanghai, Nanjing, etc. But then it's only treating about 60% in the rural places. You can imagine why it's only treating, it's leaving 40% of garbage untreated in the rural, because you need to drive a truck to collect the garbage, and that costs. That induces cost. And whatever is not cost effective wouldn't be done. So then you can see this difference, this polarity between the urban and the rural. So out of the 360 million tons of domestic garbage every year, then about 200 million tons are being incinerated. So the incinerators, there was a heavy government subsidy on this. They get 24% of the fees from garbage treatment. So there's a particular category, garbage treatment, and then you treat how much garbage, and you get that subsidy from the government. And what do they do with the garbage? Why the incinerators? Because the incinerators generate heat and can turn into electricity. And that is the profit where they can draw from. So there was the government subsidy. So over 75% of their income comes from government subsidies from the central government and local governments for power generation. It's like some of you putting a solar panel on the rooftop, and then you are being subsidized by the government. It's the same logic. So, but then let us look at the cost. The Beijing subsidies for garbage incineration cost is about 130 euros per ton. But then that means if they treat 200 million tons, that would be 26 billion euros a year. And this is heavily subsidized. So if you look at the local cost that people should be paying, it's only very little. So it's basically subsidized by the government. And now the government is gradually reducing its subsidy for the power generation, etc. So many of these incinerators are running at a loss. They are maybe running at 50% of the capacity or 80% of the capacity. So then in the first year, the first garbage incinerator was in Haidian district, where it is the university area in Beijing. So there were the residents' protests against this one. So then the government started to set standards to the incinerators, because you need to check how much dioxin you are emitting, how much pollution you are creating, what do you do with the ash that is generated, and all these things. So the government set in standards which are very strict and stricter than EU. So when we hear that it is stricter than EU, you feel that it is safe, right? But then we know that actually nothing is that safe, 100% safe. So then what do they think about the dioxin? I'm not an expert on chemistry or things, but then I try to look up the details. They say that the way they control the dioxin is that dioxin can be generated only between 250 degrees and 600 degrees. So what they do is that the incinerator would burn the garbage at between 800 and 900 degrees at that level, and then quickly reduce the temperature to below 200 degrees. So in that case, then they prevent the dioxin to be generated. Please go and find out on your own how this works and whether this works so perfectly. So when I read some of the discussions in the social media in China, people who feel not so guilty, then they will, of course, embrace this and say that, okay, so this is done with, so I don't have to be guilty anymore. But actually, we know that we have the problems of the dioxin, and what do you do with the ashes, etc. So it is not 100% safe. So if it's only 95% safe, then that's still a huge problem. And so there's the bottom ash, the fly ash, all these that need to be attended to. But then in China, starting from 2000, there was a lot of efforts by the local governments for garbage classification in the major cities. Even if people saw that you put them in the different boxes and then they were all dumped together actually not to be treated. It happens also in the housing, in the estate where I live in Hong Kong. It's very strict. You need to put things in the correct place. If you misplace something, you will need to pay a penalty in Hong Kong. Yes. So you shouldn't put your plastic bottle into the one supposed to be for paper. And then I saw with my own eyes that they put everything into the truck, the garbage truck. So then you say, what's the point? So it's a point of education, it's okay, but then of consciousness raising, but then it doesn't do much unless you have a very good recycling project. So then they were talking about, because there's the shortage of garbage, they're talking about digging out landfills to feed the incinerators. And then they found out that this is not so effective because they don't burn so well, they don't generate as much power, and there would be all the contamination while you're digging that out. So here we have the question about technology-driven projects. I think in our mentality, technology, science and technology is something very positive. So we put our faith, we put our trust in science and technology. We feel that things could be addressed, redressed by science, by technology. But I think we can see there are all these problems. The biggest problem is we are building all these nuclear power plants and don't have adequate ways of dealing with the waste. So imagine you build a new house and you have all the toilets and everything, but you don't have the pipes to let all your waste go out. You don't have the place to catch the flush from the toilet. It's the same idea. Why and how come this happened? That without finding the way to deal with the waste, where nuclear power plants can only work for 30 years, so what do you do with the waste? So I think this is a real problem that we face. You don't find a solution to the problems you are creating, and still you go on. And thinking that maybe 30 years later, when we have accumulated a lot of waste, there must be a way out. Science is advancing so much. So please ask your AI, please ask your ChatGPT what they can do with all the nuclear waste. So when people say, I don't feel so guilty now, then does that give a green light for people to continue to pollute and to produce garbage? Okay, I now come to the main part of my presentation, and I have only 15 minutes left, about the grassroots efforts. But I feel that I need to give you some general picture of the problems we face before we go into the grassroots efforts. So this is the story about the Saihamba case, when this is a place 450 kilometers from Beijing. It is now China's largest artificial woodland. Actually, the area previously it was all pine trees, but then it was all pine trees and okay. Yes, but then there was in 1863 during the Qing dynasty there was an imperial a decree which allowed farming in this area. So then it started to get into barren land. It was a huge pine forest 1,000 years ago. But then the situation is very difficult because the lowest temperature would be minus 43 degrees and Celsius. And then for 4 months in the year is under 20 degrees. Is under minus 20 degrees. So this is the forest that you now see. The pictures on the right would be the barrenness before, and then you see the people going to do the forestation with the snow up to their knees, but now you can see this green area. So this area is now, after 55 years of work from several generations of forestry experts and workers, so you now have 750 square kilometers of woodland. And so this is also helpful for Beijing to avoid its sandstorm every year. Previously, we had very serious sandstorm in Beijing because of the wind blowing all the sand over. Now, with all this shield, it's much better. And the story goes to, it's not just one person, but I think this person has to be accredited. That was in 1961. That was so long ago. I think almost all of you were not born yet. Not even your parents were born, maybe. So there was this officer, Liu. He came to look for a site to plant forest because of all the sandstorms in Beijing. Then he was going all around, but then he came to this particular place, and he saw this only large pine tree in the middle of all the barren land. So you see him. This is the old black and white photo. So he was so surprised that he saw this large, which must be over 150 years old, standing alone. Then he suddenly felt that there's the hope. Because if there can be one large, there can be more. So then they started, 1 year later, they formed a afforestation team, and then they asked young people to come over. So you find that the first batch of people who went were 369 youth. And the average age, it was under 24. I think that's most of you maybe of this age. So, and then also, about half of them were college graduates. After they finished their university, there was this call to go to this very harsh environment to plant trees, and then they went. So then the forest coverage increased from 11% in to 82% over 60 years. It's quite miraculous. But then it was done by the people. Imagine them going in the snow to plant the trees. So this is a general picture that, according to the NASA research, global green leaf area has increased by 5% from the year 2000 to 17 years later, but only 5%. But maybe 5% is also not so small if we consider all the lumbering and cutting of forests in Brazil, in Indonesia. So if globally it has increased by 5%. And China and India account for 1/3 of the greening, but then but only the 9% of the planet's land area covered in vegetation. And China alone accounts for 25% of the global net increase in leaf area, with only 6.6% of global vegetated area. And the greening in China is mostly from forests, 42%, whereas the greening from India is 82% from croplands. So there's some difference between greening with forests and greening with cropland. So I would like to go into some of the stories now. This is one of my favorite stories. Actually, I was producer of this film. I was producer of only 2 films, 2 documentary films, and this is one of them, the first of them. And we have put this one on the website, and we have put 8 different languages as subtitles, in Korean, in Arabic, in different languages. So you could go to this one. And this person, Yin Yuzhen, she worked in very harsh situations. So over 37 years, they have planted 500,000 trees. This is just herself, her husband, and 2 kids. And so more than 100 different bush and tree species, and also more than all these poplars, and how many holes she's dug for willows. So the story was that she was married into this place and thinking that she would be married into a good home. She was a beautiful young lady of 20, and then her father promised a wedding when her father was going to do business, to do trade, and went across through this desert, and then found this person who gave him water. And the father was grateful and said that, okay, I'll try to find someone to marry you. But then he couldn't find any woman who would want to marry this person. But then in those days, especially with many of the Chinese, we say that the word is golden. If you make a promise, you make a pledge, you realize this. So then he couldn't find any other girl to marry this person in the desert, so he married his own daughter. And this daughter, Yin, you can see that the first time she went, they had this is her wedding house on the top left. Because it's a desert, so then they dug a hole inside the desert, under the sand, and put in some mud bricks. So that was where she married into. And she told me, because I did a lot of interviews with her, she told me then, I wanted to commit suicide. I wouldn't want to stay in such a place. This is intolerable. But then just imagine you are in the desert. How can you commit suicide? She tried to knock her head onto the sand. She couldn't. She tried to hang herself on the tree. There's no tree at all. So failing to commit suicide, she was crying on this side of the sand dune while her husband was crying on the other side of the sand dune. And they said that they cried for many days. Then they decided, no, we have to continue to live. And so when she had to walk a long way back home to see her parents, there was no tree. So she said that, can I plant a tree so that when I go home to see my parents, I have a place where I can take some shade? And so that started the planting process. So you can see her in the top picture, a woman, strong, putting all the seedlings of all the different bushes, etc., taking them up. And so on this this picture on the left, bottom left. So she had to climb the sand up the slopes so that she was using her hand to climb the slope and then planting. So you can also see that at the back, she already planted some willows, some bushes. So she said, I would rather die of fatigue from fighting the sand than be bullied by the sand and wind. So now on the right, bottom right, you see her building a small paradise where she has all the different plants. I'm going to her place in August, in late August. If any of you happens to be in China at that time, you might want to join us. Okay, so more pictures about how she was planting all these trees and all the fruits coming. She has got very good apples. She said, I must go and visit her in August because she's got the sweetest watermelon in the whole world. So then I said, okay, I'll come. And then she has all these lambs. And then there was a lot of, because of her example, then there are a lot of volunteers and students going to her place to help with the farming. So you see all the students, and so you see if you walk along this path, there's all the huge trees around you, and that's on the left, at the top left photo is her and her son. The son is 30 years old now. Okay, Yin's story is about the efforts of one family to plant thousands of trees, hundreds of thousands of trees. And this is an example of a United Nations project supporting an NGO in China, in Qinghai province, where the population is a lot of ethnic minorities. So they have this protection network, and most of them, the network has 25 members, and mostly Tibetan. So this is the source of 3 rivers. So then they have this network, and which draw on the ecological philosophy and the cultural traditions of the Qinghai Tibet Plateau. So this is another story that I quite like, and I think some of you may echo with this story. So if you are a student from the rural, and your parents borrow money to let you go to university, after university, what would you want to do? If you tell your parents that after university, I want to come home and be a farmer. So you can imagine all this opposition from your parents. So they say, you don't, because maybe in the conception, if you're being a farmer, then you can know all the techniques by learning to do the work. But then, so what's the whole point of going to university? But of course, we have to ask this for everybody. What's the whole point of going to university and doing a PhD? What do you learn, and how can you make your knowledge useful? So this person in 2020, that's 5 years ago, he was 25 years old. He finished his university, and then he returned home to start planting trees. Of course, his family was not happy, but then he must be a very stubborn guy. So then he started doing this, and then he planted trees in the desert, and then he started doing the TikTok live streaming. And then attracted a lot of people. And then the original idea was to sell his honey gold. But then honey melon is honey melon, a typo here. So he was trying to sell his honey melon, but then he was also live streaming his work. Then they started to appeal to the public to say, please come to plant trees in Minjin. Minjin is a county. And hundreds and thousands of volunteers came. And 80% of them were youths between 20 and 35. So just that was the figure in 2024, last year. And this year, just in 2 months alone, 34,000 person times volunteered to go there and to start planting trees. So you see all these young people in the desert. So if you look at the desert like that, and then you have to imagine that after your effort, they will be all green. But then you need to have that imagination to encourage you to go on. So then they have So you see the pictures of the young people doing their work in the desert, planting trees. And they have this slogan to say that when the sand retreats, the green advances. So that is the faith, that something would change after the efforts. So this is another story about, okay, I don't have much time. Maybe I'll leave these two stories to Professor Sid, who will be talking to you, the day after. So Professor Sid, so I'll leave these two stories to you from this young person called Yang, who tried to keep the seas and the ocean alive. And then there's also this person, Wang Hulin, who also was working on donkeys and seeds. So you get the picture later. But see how beautiful the terraced land is. Okay, so I would like to spend some time going a little bit beyond my 1 hour, and so reducing the Q&A time a little bit. So if you look at Small is Beautiful from Schumacher, he said, modern man talks of a battle with nature, forgetting that if he won the battle, he would find himself on the losing side. Isn't this wise? So I fight nature. If nature loses, actually I'm a part of nature. I am also on the losing side. So he also said, the system of nature of which man is a part tends to be self-balancing, self-adjusting, and self-cleansing. Not so with technology, and not so with the human mindset. So if man is a part, but then the nature, except man, except human beings, would tend to be self-balancing and self-adjusting. So we now are in an age of the Newspeak of 1984. So how many of you have read the book 1984 by George Orwell? Thank you, quite a lot of you. If you haven't, then maybe it's good to go for it. So it was written in 1948, and he was imagining the time in 1984. That was right after the World War. And of course, many of you would have read Animal Farm. But then I would want to say that, note that in Animal Farm, he was criticizing the dictatorships, the authoritarianism, not only of the Soviet bloc, but also of the Western bloc. So this has to be borne in mind. He was criticizing both blocs, not just one bloc. So then in 1984, he talked about the Newspeak. The Newspeak is that we, under all this dictatorship, we treat things and we say war is peace. So Netanyahu is the best disciple. Now he says that we are fighting war, and Donald Trump is saying, now we are fighting the war, and then we can secure peace. So war is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength. So see how all this Newspeak is working. And George Orwell already was foreseeing that back in over 100 years ago. No, less than 100 years ago, maybe 80 years ago. So now we see the world when Barack Obama got the Nobel Peace Prize in 2009, despite his war in Afghanistan. And now Donald Trump was nominated by the Pakistan government one day before he dropped the bombs on Iran's nuclear facilities. And he is still thinking that he might get the Nobel Peace Prize. So people were saying that he would be winning the Nobel Peace Prize and the Oscar Award for the best actor in the world. So when we see the world dominated by the barbaric elites, this world is imploding. We can see that the finance capital is never satiated. The greed is there, always for profits. There is the never-ending scramble for geopolitical domination, the infinite pursuit of science and technology in modernization, and all this blind faith, this superstition in progress and development. And there is we see all these man-made catastrophes, but then there's the refusal to confront them. And there's the inability to feel the impact of climate collapse. We don't talk about climate change anymore. It is a collapse. So we should say things as they are. And there's also our overall, our complicity and our abandonment of our responsibility to our future generations when we have business as usual. So how do we learn from the heroines and the heroes who still fight for an ecological and sustainable civilization? So about the question about analyzing the world, we produced this book by Michael Hudson, which is called The Destiny of Civilization, in which he would trace he wrote the book Super Imperialism, and I think most of you might have read it. And so this book, The Destiny of Civilization, is a series of lectures in which he made analysis about the state of politics and finance in the United States. So I think we need to return to indigenous wisdoms and indigenous cosmologies, going back from the time when modernity started with industrial capitalism. So we have done quite a lot of interviews and seminars with the Zapatistas. So here's a book we produced about the. Okay, this is the book we produced about returning to the indigenous wisdoms of the Zapatistas. So this is produced in Spanish and in English. The whole thing can be downloaded for free on the Global University website. And you see have you heard about the Zapatistas? How many of you have heard about them? Well, that's very good. How many of you have attended their little school? Not yet. Ah, yes, we must listen more, hear from you about the little school that they are doing. So you see the women in colorful costume and powerful, strong. This is the EZLN. And apart from the Zapatistas, we have also been trying to learn from the communes in Venezuela. They learned about the communes from China's People's Commune. And then they have been doing the communes because Hugo Chavez, a few years before he died, he had this slogan, communes or nothing. That means even if you take state power, even if you implement a lot of policies, if you do not have communes that represent the people's power, that have the people participating in deciding on their everyday life, producing and relating to each other in solidarity, there is no future. That it is nothing. So that's the communes and that is you see the communes working there. I've been in Venezuela 3 times and just also recently, and we try to learn how they regenerate people's self-organization. And when we talk from below, we can try to look at their experiences. And this is a friend from India, and we produced his 2 books. One is the Dreams Without an Expiry Date. No expiry date for your dreams, so please keep on dreaming. And he also did this book, which we produced just 2 weeks ago. This is called The Reuben Republic. So if you are interested, you can try to look at the book. These are all available for free online. And he's a people scientist. He studied in Moscow on nuclear energy. He's a physicist. On return to India, he did the people's science. He was not developing bombs. He was developing the people's capacity to deal with their daily lives. So they have a very famous people's science network in India. And I was very glad to hear that he claims to be a Marxist Gandhian, or a Gandhian Marxist. So it might sound rather strange to have Gandhism and Marxism together, but then he was fighting for social justice, for change in the world, fighting for communism, but he was not going for the industrial capitalism. He went for Gandhi's ideas about reviving agriculture, because why is agriculture important? During the pandemic, you would know that if you have a small piece of land where you can have your own food, you are the lucky one. So we need places where we produce the food and be able to manage our life with all the resources of water, soil, sunshine. So then he follows the Gandhian's idea of the organization of society with rural republics. So every village is a republic in itself. And so they are linked and with each other. So you can go to read more of this if you are interested. And then so they have this People's Science Movement in Kerala, and they say that it has to be scale. There has to be a scale. Because we were talking about only pockets of change and alternatives, but then our friends in India, of course, they have a huge population. And so they say that if you do something is only with a dozen people, it doesn't make sense. So every summer, they would mobilize hundreds of thousands of students to go to different villages to learn people's science. And so they just swap from the families. And so you put your kids to a different state in India, and then you have all these summer camps. So the dances, and they make their own soap, etc. So the last thing I would like to talk about is the PeaceWomen project. This is the book, weighing 1.3 kilos, which I'm going to leave with the host here. And so this is the project we did in 2005. We nominated 1,000 women for the Nobel Peace Prize. And so we documented the stories of 1,000 women. So you could try to, and we can only devote 2 pages to each woman. And so we only documented 999 women, leaving one to be the anonymous, who would be every one of us here. I'm sorry about the men, so maybe we can say that it is not just biological, but then I think we need to give special emphasis on making the work of women visible. It is also because of this project that I came to know Yin Yuzhen and many other peace women in China. And in this project, we try to call for nominations, and we have an international committee of 20 people in every corner of the world. Then we received the nominations, and we did the checking. And so, we were writing the stories. And if there were 2 nominations, for example, one for the NGO person and one for the women, the village women who's being helped by the NGO, we would select the village woman to give more visibility to them. And we can see that actually many of them were very proud. Even if we didn't get the prize, we give them a certificate to say that they had been nominated. So then they would feel very proud. They would tell the people in the village to say, I have been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. So I think this is this pride and this self-recognition in the work that we do that we lack. So again, back to the slogan, we should have, despite the pessimism in the intellect, we need to have optimism in the will. And I would like to emphasize that subaltern is not just pointing to someone, it's a relationship. It's a relationship to see how it could be the subaltern versus the elite. I think most of us here belong to the group of the elite. Even if you are unemployed, you still, with all your training and all your education. But then we need to see this relationship and see how we can change this so that everybody can become an elite, so that everybody can become a people's science. So, and yesterday, I think we had also had some discussions about the agency. So I think for the question of agency, I think every one of us can be an active agent. So we do not divide between the scholar and the activist. So we like to use the term scholar-activist or activist-scholar. When we are doing our work on research, when we are writing about the injustices, when we are doing everything we can in our capacity, we are an activist. And so being an activist, having the agency, we can make some changes in our own lives, in the lives of our neighborhood, and also in the lives of people, especially in the global south. So thank you very much.